Okay, so let's start coloring now our cactus. So what I did here, while you were not looking, I cleaned up the pencil drawing because they were searching lines, measuring lines. I don't need those. I can simply go over them with a kneaded eraser, right, softly, take them out, take out the excess lines, and then redraw a little bit with more care the outlines of the figure. So I want to start blocking in the basic, blocking in the colors, right? The basic colors of my cactus. So I'm going to start with a terracotta vase quickly, and I mixed an orangey color with my basic palette here. So I used a little bit of this cool yellow, a little bit of alizarin crimson, and cobalt blue. It seemed that it produced a nice light terracotta color. So plug it in, right? It's going to be a first wash, so I don't worry too much about the right color, right, the right value. I just have to go close to it, right? And then there is no areas of white in there, so I can simply paint this color pretty much everywhere. So I'm blocking in the color, right? So I have a hot press sheet of paper, arches, and it's tricky to paint on hot press, but you know, I wanna privilege the detail a little bit, right? So now I'm blocking the terracotta colors. I want to block now the earth color that I have in here, which is kind of a dark brown. So I'm going to proceed mixing a color that is just violet, right? That is going to approximate that dark red, dark brown, rich brown. So on the warm side, so maybe I should use some warm red in there, right? And if I use the warm red, you'll see that the when I mix it with the warm blue or the cobalt blue, yeah, I'm not gonna have a violet. I'm gonna have a brownish color. So let's see, still blue, very blue. So I don't like that. All right, more red, right? And then I just need a little bit of that color here, just to have the an idea of more or less what colors, what dominance I'm going to have in this area here. So the this layer here, the vase, is still not dry, which is kind of, I like it because it is going to soften up the edges in there, and that kind of helps me a little bit with the sense of fuzziness, you know, of the earth, but it's not very wet, meaning the watercolor dishwash is not gonna go up too much, right? So I want to be careful now here, because this I want to be sharp, right? So for now I'm gonna stay away from it, and I look at it across a little bit. All right, it looks, let's try, right guys? Let's try, see what happens, right? It looks dry, so we'll see. Well, it seems to be dry. It doesn't bleed much. All right, so in the summer, you'd be amazed how quickly a wash like this is drying. I added a couple little cacti in there, little different ones that might daughter named, and I can't remember their names, but all right. She likes cacti now. She is at that age when, you know, teenagers get defensive, and you gotta be careful talking to them, and so I guess cactus is the perfect plant for this age. A little bit prickly. All right, anyway, she's very sweet, my girl. Right. All right, so anyway, so now that is my basic color. I'm gonna close the door because the cat is meowing. She wants to get in, and this is not a hotel, right? Okay, so now let's see. Now I want to block the this color here. So let me see if I can move. Let me show you the light. So see how up in this area here, I got, where's the brush here? I got a little bit of orangey color in there, and as I move down, you get more on the violet, cool, so warm and cool. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna block in. I'm going to paint over this white little thing. I'm gonna scrape them off, right? Later, scrape off the little dot. But for now, I'm gonna be concerned with this kind of yellowish cast in here, okay? So clearly, I'm not going to achieve a high level of precision in here. It's more like to show how to show you how to proceed, right, with this with painting this cactus. Okay, so I need to wipe my plate, and all right, let's see if we can mix a little bit of that beautiful yellow, right? It looks very balanced, actually. Difficult to say. So maybe it's a little bit on the warm side, but it looks very balanced in terms of temperature, right? All right, see what we can do, right? So I'm gonna get this nice cadmium medium yellow, and maybe a touch of that cool color. So what I'm gonna do, I'm going to block it in here pretty much everywhere in the top of the flower, right? Oh, I should have looked up the name of the parts of the cactus. I didn't. My bad. I don't think I ever painted cacti in my career as scientific illustrator. Painted the weirdest thing, but never a cactus. No, actually I did. This big mural for a nature center in Florida. Okay, so now maybe I lighten it up a little bit like that, and now I can see if I can gradually okay, no, I'm gonna leave it alone. I'm gonna let it dry because I'm gonna go over it with a layer of red when that is dry. So I'm gonna obtain an optical mix. And now I want to I want to tackle the green, the part of the cactus green here, right? Let's see what happens with that. So I would use a nice cool yellow for that, and a nice ultramarine blue, because it's a dark, cool green, see that? So probably I need to get, let's see, way cooler, right? But if I look at it, let's see that there's a yellowish glow at the bottom. So I'm gonna go over it with the first layer. Let me see. All right, maybe that's gonna do it, right? Let's see. So you see the pencil drawing, it will mostly disappear if the pencil is light. So it's really up to you. I mean, sometimes, oh sweet, sometimes the pencil mark is a nuisance. You want to get rid of it. Sometimes not. Depend. So if it's a sketchy painting, quick sketch, nice loose painting, the pencil actually kind of adds a little bit to the immediacy of to the vitality of the sketch, right? If instead you want to have a complete illusion of impression of life or the real thing, then you have to eliminate anything that can kind of recall a technique, because the illusion has to be complete. If you have something that reminds of, oh, I see the pencil, that's a drawing, not the real thing. This metamorphosis from painting to real thing is kind of, it doesn't work, right? So typically in the scientific illustration art, you don't want to have that. You don't want to have pencil marks or brushstroke, because the emphasis is in really describing as much as possible the illusion or the information, only the information that needs to be conveyed, which is the scientific information. Okay, so sometime in botanical art there are these beautiful drawing, which I use that technique too, where you have some part of it is highly finished, and part of it is you see the pencil. I'm going to show you, I have some drawings on that, and then you gradually go from black and white drawing to finished, really detailed work. It's kind of a nice effect, because you see the technique, and in which case it's it's acceptable. So, all right, so I'm going to show you a couple of works like that I did later. So now, see the glow now that of the yellow is there because, so this is a transparent layer, and the light is going through now 2 layers. So when I do this, I don't want to have, I don't want to go over the layer too many times, because if I keep rubbing on the layer with a brush, I disturb the previous layer, and then it's not going to be an optical effect, a mix anymore, meaning a layer over a layer. It's going to be a molecular mix, which is different, right? So the molecule, the pigment come together instead of being layered on one on top of the other one. So I'm going to leave this like this for now, because I achieved a decent color that I like for now. And then I'm going to start with the little floret that are now more on the violet side. Now I don't have, not violet, but a cooler red. I do not have that beautiful rose color, but this is going to be as close as it gets, right? So normally in painting, normally when I work, I have waited for this to be dry, because I don't want this to go too much, to risk that this color will bleed up into that. I go close to it, and then when again, I don't see highlights in there, and completely white, so I can go over the whole area with the weakest value that I find in there, because later I can add darker and darker values, right, to that. So now, but this being said, I mean, that has to be dry, but not completely, because when I look at my cactus, this area here is a little bit cooler, and then it moves up, gets warmer. So now that it seemed to me like that layer is a little bit dry. So now what I do, I'm gonna go right next to it a little bit and just let that bleed a little bit. So that violet will kind of go up a little bit into the top part of the flower, creating a little bit of a intermediate area of color, right? Right. So you remember at the beginning of the always tempted to say semester, but in fact it is a kind of a semester. At the beginning of the course, we discussed the wet on wet, wet on dry, and everything between. So this is a wet on damp, right? Kind of. So there's going to be many levels of wetness or dampness or almost completely dry that I want to understand, to identify by just looking at the shimmering of the paper. You know, the more the paper shimmers, the more the layers is wet. So when the shimmering is reduced, I know that it's almost dry, and if I put the paint in there, the paint will not go up too far away from the margin where I put it. Okay, so let's block in the other two here but see, what I'm doing is I'm trying to capture the essential values of the cactus in here with a color that is very close to it, but not necessarily as dark as is in there, as developed tone is in there. Just the essential color, essential hue, and then later I will refine it in terms of values, right? So I'm gonna wait for that. So let's go for the other one. The other little thing is in here, little cacti. Same thing. I don't see highlights. I mean white to the paper. They are a little bit, slightly more yellow. So I'm gonna put a little bit more of yellow, right? In the ultramarine blue. And then now I'm gonna wait. What I could do, I could mess a little bit with the pot, right? So if I look at this area here, it is a little bit darker, right? So I'm trying the color here, testing, because this is anyway just a sketch. If this is where a painting that I would hope to sell, of course I'm not going to do that in there, right? But trying the color, testing the color on the side on a piece of paper before you put it in there is always a good idea, right? Okay, so that's going to be dark, eventually going to be darker. It's going to be darker in here, right? And then what I can start to do now is play with the soil, right? So playing with the soil, I have all these. So I'm gonna start with by defining bigger chunks, right? Define bigger chunks here, right? I see there, right? I mean, the good thing of the earth, you don't really have to copy these things exactly. You had to understand how the chunks are organized, right? And then you can pretty much make it up, right? This portion here pretty dark. Also because it's dark here. Let me see. It's very dark here too. All right. Okay, so that I want to push back, right? So I'm going to kind of cool it off, gray it down, etc. Right? And I go back with the chunk. Now the light comes from more or less here, right? This direction in here. So eventually I might have a little bit of more shadow here, a little bit more shading in here, right? And in there. And in this area here is going to be pretty much evenly illuminated, except for maybe here, because it's there's a shadow cast by the rim of the vase, right? So you see how the vase initially looked much more intense in color than it is now, because two reasons. One, as the colors dries up, it gets lighter, so you have to consider that when you paint. The other one is that as I start adding other colors, those colors will now affect each other, right? So, for example, if I have a color that is dark on a white background, when I put the dark background around, that color will change in the appearance or value. And if it looked dark before, now it looks lighter because I'm comparing it to the dark background instead of the white background. So same thing for the colors. If I have a dull color all over and in there put a slightly brighter color, that, yeah, let's say like a very dull yellow ochre, that dull yellow ochre will appear to be beautifully glowing and glorious, but because the gray background, right? And vice versa. So so now the light comes from here, right? One thing you want to keep in mind is that in terms of shadow, the way it behaves is light, cool light source, warm shadow. Warm light source, cool shadow, right? So sorry, let me say it again. If I have a cool light source, the shadow will look warm. And if I have a warm light source, the shadow will look cool. In this case, I have light from outside that is kind of cool because it's evening and it's getting that kind of cool bluish cold light, which is kind of taking over the scene here, and therefore that the shadow will be warm, right? So now I mean, you see how this work start as a sketch, right? But then later, I mean, if this were a sketch, it would be even more quick and loose, etc. It is not, and I'm trying to get a little bit more detail in here, right? So now I start layering the colors a little bit more precisely, right? So this is one of the little section of the cactus, right? And so on this side in here, the section ends in here, right? This is not a section, but in my cactus, what happened is I'm gonna have this kind of guy breaking up with the earth. My gosh, this area here now also is shaded, right? Because it casts a shadow from the top of the cactus. But I don't want the shadow to be too sharp, because it's not. And I want to now kind of block in and slightly lighter green here, right? Right, like this. So I could have done the opposite. I could have put this first and then that first. But I wanted to establish this value first, and then I added this, but as you see, kind of lifted up the excess paint. So you could paint in many, in many ways. Once you understand what you want to obtain, and once you understand how the watercolor really behaves, because watercolor is kind of a fascinating medium, because you gotta plan it before you do it. But then when you start painting, watercolor, you have to accept that the watercolor maybe is, it's not going to behave exactly as you want it, right? So it's kind of had a zone. It's an interesting balance between control and letting go, right? So now, but you see how now I kind of blocking in a sense, the volume aspect, the volumetric aspect of my cactus by having different areas with different color, but not just different color, also different temperature, right? So this area here that catch light tend to have a warmer cast because they catch more light, and the color is inherently warm, so that will become warmer. This area here, even though in reality the light is cool and this is a shadow, still clearly the green, the dark green of deep dark green of the cactus is clearly taking over, and it still appears still cool, right? So it's relatively cool. So another thing is that I also have a lamp in here that is warm. So it's because the light is changing, outside is getting dark, I had to set up a lamp, and the lamp that I have is warm. So as the light outside decreases, I'm gonna have gradually a switching of the temperatures from when I started. So anyway, so let's look at these little guys in here. So I want to develop, if possible, the whole scene, whole composition together, right? Because that way I can keep a balance in terms of temperature, in terms of values, in terms of color, and composition, right? In composition. So still I'm developing, but still in terms of big areas, big chunks of color. I'm not getting to the detail yet. When I have developed the characteristic of my plant a little bit more precise, the genetic, volumetric, and chromatic characteristic of my color of my subject, I'm sorry, then I can afford to stop, slow down, and get back into detail and develop a small area at a time, because that small area will be developed within the context of something that already has a chromatic and value, in terms of value identity, right? So what I have to do now, I'm going to see, I can put another darker value here, right? I had this nice watercolor, but I haven't used this in a long time because I have so many watercolors that I finished in our bunch first. And so what happened, they separated, the watercolor separated. I think that one of you guys, think Laura had a problem with this, with the watercolor separating. And what you do, you simply squeeze it out on a plate. Actually, that's what I did. I squeezed it out on a plate like this, the whole tube, right? And then, okay, this is now the palette I'm using. This whole tube on a plate, squeeze out all the paint, and the gum arabic, and then you mix it back together. You kind of mix it back together. Then what I did, I just simply took the paint and put in this little container palette and let it dry. They all separated, all of them. So anyway, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a quick break, right? And to let this dry up a little bit, and then I'll see you in a few minutes.